So I'm going to actually call tonight's meeting to order. This is our board reorganization meeting. So maybe we could start, because we have new board members at the table, we could start with an introduction. I don't mind starting. I'm Lynn Coda, I'm the superintendent. And we can maybe zoom right around, Mary.
Oh, Mary Niles, I'm from Montgomery.
Emily Norris, Sheldon.
Teresa Hitchcock, Sheldon Principal.
Gavin Roddy, Berkshire Principal. Morgan Ditto, CFO.
Miranda Johnson, Sheldon.
Courtney Fletcher. What did you say? Oh, CFO. Administrative
Already took
Assistant
that one.
Lynn and Communications Coordinator.
What's that? Kevin Briggs,
That's
Principal, in Bakersfield.
Arlene O'Rourke, board member, Bakersfield.
Audrey Shea, new board member, Bakersfield.
John Jejix, Berkshire.
And then do we want to go to Lisa?
Lisa Hingo, Berkshire.
And Michelle.
Michelle Scott, Montgomery.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Morgan, do we have the oath of office piece?
We have it for all three.
Okay,
They're all set.
we're good, perfect. So the next up on the agenda, I will be looking for a nomination for board chair.
I nominate Mary Niles.
Beat me to it.
Thank you.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, we'll do this by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Audrey?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
And Michelle?
Aye.
I'm also an aye.
Oh my gosh, I went right by you,
That's all
John. Sorry about that. All right, Mary, I'm gonna turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Nice to see everyone. So moving on for reorganization, up next is our vice chair position. Currently, Emily has served in that capacity and has expressed interest and willingness to continue. Open to nominations.
I'll nominate Emily.
Okay, bravo, perfect. We'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Perfect, okay. So our clerk position, Morgan, you'll have to refresh.
Arlene.
Arlene, okay. Arlene, are you comfortable continuing to serve in that capacity as
Sure.
clerk? All right, so I will nominate Arlene. We'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John, Emily,
Aye.
Mary is an aye. Arlene?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. So our supervisory union board reps, currently on that board is myself, Emily, and it was Zach, who's now stepped down. So wanted to just open up kind of discussion around, I would like to continue serving. Emily is comfortable continuing to serve, but if there was someone else who is interested, we certainly need one to fill that one spot that's open. Anyone have a particular interest in that? We meet the third Wednesday of each month. It's not every month, actually. We take a couple months off, so it isn't quite as regular as the district meetings. We meet at 6 o'clock here at the central office.
It's really August through January. We typically don't meet in February or March, and then we meet to reorganize in April and won't meet again until August, unless things come up along the way.
There are occasionally special
Yeah.
meetings and need to call an extra meeting. And we do need to have 3 representatives from the NMV board. So myself and Emily and anyone else have the capacity and interest.
So I can, I just don't know if I can commit all the time. Is that why we have 3 now? where we had 2 before, is that, or
We've
is it,
always had 3.
you've always had 3?
Yeah, I mean, there are people that aren't able to come to every meeting, but it is a 6-member board and we need 4 to
Okay.
have a quorum, so it would be helpful if you could come most of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm in the same boat, Miranda.
Yeah.
It's really hard for me to get to everyone, so
right,
yeah,
Yeah.
just making sure that we can get ahead of the numbers.
okay,
And virtual is always an option
okay.
also, if that kind of helps ease some of the strain around it, schedule
I'll try it out.
wise.
If I can't find that commitment to stay, then I'll let you
Sure.
know, but I'll
okay.
step in.
Okay, so, so then I'll make a motion to nominate, can I nominate myself?
You can do it as a whole
That,
group, so
okay,
you
the
could-
three SU reps would be Mary, Emily, and Miranda. Any more discussion around that from the board? All right, so we'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. All right, so policy committee, Lisa, are you still, able to be the policy committee person?
Yes, as far as I know, I shouldn't have any more conflicts than what I've had in the past. So
Great.
if anybody is willing to take my place, you're welcome to, but otherwise I can continue on.
All right, thank you so much. You've been so steadfast. You've been really steadfast in that role for so many years. It does not go unnoticed or unappreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, I enjoy it, thanks.
All right, well, it doesn't seem as though anyone's clamoring to unseat you for that position, Lisa, so I'll make a motion to nominate Lisa for the policy committee. We'll do that by roll. Michelle,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. So our negotiations council at the moment is comprised of myself and John, correct, right, John?
Yes.
And Arlene, John and
Oh,
Arlene.
and
are
Arlene,
split.
right, and you split, that's right. It says 2 here in brackets, but it's actually 3 of us because you all split those roles. Any other interest for anyone to, are you all comfortable continuing to serve in that capacity? Okay. So I'll make a motion for the negotiations council to be comprised of Arlene and John and Mary. We'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. So for finance, the motion to approve warrants electronically, Morgan, that needs to be a formal motion to continue.
That doesn't need to be a formal motion to continue that, and just an encouragement for folks to hop on those when they come through. We are often looking for a second electronic signature.
Yeah, okay. And Morgan, do you want to maybe take a moment and explain to Audrey that what she'll be looking at when
Sure.
she gets those emails?
So the school board has the final say before we send out checks. In theory, there are things like payroll that we're gonna pay people before you actually see the payroll warrants, things like that. Historically, some school boards have sat down for the first couple hours of a meeting and gone through everyone and then signed it off that way. Most boards now are doing it electronically, so we will send you a list of the payments to be made. Payrolls every other week and accounts payable is usually every week. And then we wait for at least 2 board members to reply to that email and say that they're okay with those going out.
That's not just the town, like for Bakersfield, it's for the.
It's for the entire district.
Gotcha, okay,
Great, thanks, Morgan.
thanks. This out.
All right, so let's see, the regular meeting schedule and the
So we'll want to do a motion
Oh,
on that.
we do need a formal one, oh, pardon me. Okay, I'll make a motion for the approval of warrants electronically. We'll do that by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Audrey? John? Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So our regular meeting, the first Wednesday of every month at 6:30. The locations, remind me, January, February, March, April? We do 4 at
It's
the
just three.
central.
January, February, March.
January, February, March here at the central office.
I won't fight you on April.
I mean, April's still mud season.
It sure
and-
is.
Guest.
And then what, we start rotating
Yes.
around to the different schools after that. Any discussion? How is that? I mean, do you,
It's probably, I mean, for those of us that are either on one far end or the other sometimes, but we're all hitting that. I think sometimes I'm like, it'd be so much easier just to come here, but also the value of seeing everybody's schools, what's changing, what's going on. I also enjoy, so I'm torn
right.
between my selfishness and my caring side.
So how often, so if, for the schools, September, October, November, December, so it's twice,
Each school.
gets 2
Gets
meetings,
twice, yeah.
and then the 3, because we don't meet in July. Okay. But I certainly understand, I mean, I'm open, it would then mean that one school, if we added one more meeting here in April, one school would get 2 in the annual cycle, 2 visits, or 2.
One school would just get 1, and then we could just be strategic, and they could get 2 in the next year.
Roll it in,
Right.
yeah.
Courtney loves to schedule things like that. We have these ideas, right, Courtney?
Sweet.
Is there interest from the board in considering you think April over December?
No.
If we did 4 here,
Yeah.
I think some of it's just the ease, it's a little bit easier with the weather and the roads.
Yeah, then do December to March for sure.
You probably have the worst roads.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
what,
have-
how about for you? December or April? Which is worse?
Both,
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
all of it.
Should be buried in mud in April.
I mean, yes, ice in December, ice and snow in December, and deep mud in April. But really, once I get the 3 miles off the hill, then it doesn't matter so much whether I'm driving to the central office or Sheldon or Bakersfield.
And there's always a virtual option too.
Right.
So if someone doesn't feel
Right,
comfortable, you can
right.
still, yeah.
There really is benefit to being in schools
Yeah.
because
Oh, for
it is a
sure.
little easier for people to have because they also have their 2 spotlights.
Yeah.
And it's a little easier to have, like Kevin's gonna do a spotlight tonight, wouldn't be as easy to get if you were gonna have students or staff members join him to get them here, as it would be
Sure. No, it
there.
makes
So it's
sense.
just something to
Yep.
think about,
That is what
totally
happened
understand the idea.
Had to
but-
stop everybody. We thought it was gonna be at our place.
Oh,
And then I asked Court, she said, no, I was like, oh.
Understood,
so the
okay.
reason why he's in March for Spotlight is because he's usually the first person in August, and I can't make the principal do a Spotlight in August, so I delay.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Why not?
You only gotta pass on
Wanna
your first
just
day.
Don't.
Should we stay
It's
the,
not-
no.
stay the
Leave it as
course
it is.
then?
It's not
Okay.
broke, we don't need to fix it.
All right, well, so I think we'll just, if everyone's okay with it, maybe we'll stay the course with January, February, March here, central office, and then rotating
Sure.
through the schools, keeping it on the first Wednesday at 6:30. That time still works okay for everyone? Okay, do we need a motion on that, if it's staying the same?
I don't think so. I think you're probably fine.
They didn't last.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good to move on. Lynn, do you want to speak to the Robert's Rules, Code of Ethics, Conflict of Interest stuff?
I can. First, could we talk about the posting locations?
Oh,
Are we still
sorry,
good
yeah,
with
I
all
missed
of
that.
those?
Right. Remind everyone and for our audience where we post meetings, agendas.
I post all of our agendas on our FNESU website, and then I send them out to each town clerk and each school, and they post them.
Great. Yeah, it seems to be totally adequate. And I haven't heard from, I mean, if we were hearing from the community that they needed more options for where it was posted, but I haven't heard anything.
I haven't either. I usually get responses back, especially from this side.
Great.
Okay, we did it, we're good, thank you.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, Courtney. Okay.
So Robert's rules, we typically, for several years have used Robert's rules for small boards because you are a relatively small board that allows Mary to vote and not just be a tiebreaker. So that's something I would recommend for you to stick with the Robert's rules for small boards unless someone had a objection to that.
No, it seems to work well. Do we need a motion on that or no?
I mean, I'm fine with just guidance, especially if it's not changing.
Yeah.
So Courtney is about to pass out the Code of Ethics for Vermont school board members. And Lisa and Michelle, I'm about to send those to you. So each year, I think it's important for us to take a few minutes just to read this Code of Ethics as a good reminder for board members about your duties and responsibilities and what your role really is as a board member. We'll have it come back around so that you can each take two. You can go home with one and sign one and return one to me. So let me send these to Lisa, Michelle.
What's that?
You too, so you have a copy.
I have to.
Okay.
No, I'm a good listener.
Keep sending them there.
Should have said that from the beginning.
Read it over here.
I have it on
I
digitally.
know your kids did it.
To Courtney or back to you, Lynn?
Back to me is fine. Thank you. So next up is the FNESU board member conflict of interest policy, and that's something that's in your virtual digital packet. I think it's important for you to read through that just to remind yourselves of your obligations to make sure that as this board is making decisions that you're really thoughtful about whether or not a decision is something that would create a conflict of interest for you to be a part of, and or your personal dealings outside of school, whether or not that might create a conflict of interest. So just be thoughtful about that piece. And if you're in a situation where, Arlene, can I use you as an example?
Sure.
So Arlene has a daughter who teaches within the supervisory union. So if they're within this district, so she should not vote on anything that would directly impact her daughter. So it would be up to Arlene to declare, I'm gonna recuse myself from this vote because there's a conflict here. So those kinds of examples.
Great, thanks, Lynn. So official media for publishing meetings.
We never really identified, in years past when the County Courier was still running, we just said if there's something that we had to post, we don't typically run the newspaper ads because we post in so many other ways. But if we have to publish something, it would go through the St. Albans Messenger, but we don't publish enough to really select them as like our official, just knowing that that's where we would post if we were going to.
the board communication spokesperson.
So one of the things to remember as board members is that you can speak as a board when you're together. That's when you have the authority, but you cannot, as an individual person, speak on behalf of the board. Outside of a board meeting, you're a private citizen. So it's really important to remember that and make sure that if someone, a reporter or someone calls you and says, can you comment on this thing, that you don't do that. You can't comment as a board member on something. If there were going to be a comment from the board, that would typically be orchestrated through Mary, where I typically am the spokesperson for the district and for the supervisory union, and then if there is a need for a board comment, that would go through Mary, and she would do some sort of reach out to other board members. But you can't do board business outside of a board meeting unless Mary does an individual check-in or calls a special meeting to actually speak on behalf of the board. So typically it's me, but sometimes in consultation with you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
All right, and then we have kind of a couple of policies here to review. One being the public comment policy, and then handling of complaints and use of chain of command.
So the public comment policy is something that, for those of you who have been around for a while, you remember that we had some pretty contentious meetings during COVID, and in several of those meetings, there were people who were kind of creating those moments that didn't live within our district and had no connection really to our district. So this policy was reviewed and adopted during that time period to help address some of that. So this policy is very clear about who may address the board and how you will handle it if there's a lot of people that show up to have public comment. So it really talks about using a speaker's list and directing an amount of time that's at the discretion of the chair to be able to determine all of those pieces. So are there any questions about, and I think the other most important part is that public comment is not intended to be a back and forth between the board or administration with the public. It's really, the public has the ability to come in and make a comment for the board to hear, and then the board doesn't engage in a back and forth with the public, but they hear the public and take that into consideration as they move forward and do their business. And then this next policy is about handling complaints. And for those of you who have been doing this a while, you know that sometimes the public doesn't understand that you, as board members, should not be the first line of a complaint. So it has happened to many of you where people will bring their complaint to you. So remembering that complaints should start at the source of where the concern is. So if a complaint has to do with someone who is upset with a teacher, our first direction should be, please go speak with the teacher. If you are at that point not satisfied with where that lands, you would speak with the principal. If you're not satisfied at that point, you would speak with the superintendent. If you're not satisfied at that point, then the complaint can come to the board. But it should not skip all of those steps and go to you as board members. So I think it's okay to listen and hear, but I would encourage you to redirect and help people to understand that the reality is most complaints get solved at lower levels. They don't need to come up to the board level. But a lot of times people at lower levels don't have an opportunity to solve because that's not where people go with their complaints. So encourage people to go back.
Question, Lynn.
Yes.
Technicality, position like Catherine's, she's technically a district. Still tell them, speak with her, then go to principal, or is there someone else when it's a district employee rather than a school employee?
That would still be Kevin,
Okay.
because the assignment is in that school. Right. Yeah. That's a great question, though. No one's ever asked that. It's a good one.
Not that I want people to complain about Catherine.
Let's do it that is, Jack.
All right, the board development plan. You want to speak a little to
Sure.
that, Lynn?
So I think in terms of professional development, you are all members of a really fantastic organization called the Vermont School Boards Association, and For Michelle and Audrey, you both should have FNESU email accounts by now. Those will be shared with the Vermont School Boards Association, so you'll start receiving professional updates from them. They offer webinars, they offer in-person training. There are online resources that you can view as board members, so those are almost always really useful professional learning opportunities. So I encourage anyone who's sitting on a board seat to really think about using the VSBA as a resource to learn more about your work on the board. The other piece I will say about professional development is that we also have opportunities throughout the year where we pull board members in to do board retreats and some training opportunities. We have one coming up. I'm not sure. I don't think the communication has gone out yet, but has it gone out?
Not yet.
So with some of the changes that are happening so quickly in our education world right now, we're going to bring in an attorney to talk to the board about some of the things that you should know as board members. So that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks. And then in terms of new board member orientation, both Audrey and Michelle, I'll reach out to you, and we have a VSBA kind of orientation workbook that I will share with you, and then we can have some conversations about what's in that workbook. I will admit that I haven't done a great job of setting up a formal structure for board orientation, but I'm available to talk through, and I know Mary's a great board chair, and she's also really helpful if there are questions that you have, so for either of us. And I'll just say up front, in terms of new board members, we are the worst at using acronyms in education. There's all kinds of language that we use, and we forget that people that are not in education might not know those terms. So stop us at any point and say, we don't want you to be wondering, what does that mean? Ask us in the moment, and that'll help remind us to not use those acronyms. So
Thanks. All right, so the piece around advocacy and the current legislative issues.
So there, those of you that are in the VSBA, you're getting a lot of email messages, I would assume, from the VSBA about what's happening during this legislative session. And that happens every year, where you'll get regular updates, and you'll get 3 times a year legislative summaries. So any one of you has the ability to contact your legislators and give your own personal opinion about something that's happening in the legislature. You can't say, I'm Emily Norris and I represent the NMV board and this is my opinion about something. You can say, I am on the board, this is my personal opinion about something. You also, as a board, if there's something that's happening during the legislative session, you could make a decision to collectively have that conversation at a board meeting and say, we would like to send a position, or we would like to, reach out to our legislators as a board. So typically, the chair would take the lead on something like that. But you were going to take a position as a board, it needs to be done at a board meeting.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, well that is the end of board reorganization stuff. So moving on, we've got our consent agenda, which includes the prior minutes from the February 5th meeting, a number of second read policies. Any discussion on any of that? Questions, comments? Okay, so then I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Lisa?
Aye.
Michelle?
Hi.
Miranda?
Hi.
Arlene?
Aye.
Audrey?
Aye.
John? Emily? And Mary is an aye. Lynn, any need to change the flow of the meeting?
No.
Prioritize anything?
No.
Okay. Okay, so that brings us to our public comment, our recognition of visitors. I have one person, hi, nice to see you in the room here. Courtney, anyone virtually than who I see on the screen? Okay, are you here for public comment?
Yes.
Okay, and so if you would kindly just introduce yourself, let us know where you're from, and Usually we ask, 3 minutes or so for public comment, but if you need a little more time, of course, it's not a problem.
Yeah, my name is Dan O'Rourke from Bakersfield. Here, as I'm speaking, I'll pass some of these out. These are just a couple of things out of the references that I'm not to speak to. I've only got, I think, like 6 copies, so I don't have enough for everybody. So I came tonight basically to ask the school board, I'd like you guys to take a closer look at provisional licenses and how we monitor them within the school district. In accordance with the one memo that went out, was signed or sent out in 2014, then updated again in 2016. Licenses are expected to be completed, the necessary steps per the plan for licensure that they submitted, obtain an initial license or appropriate endorsement before the provisional license expires. They must submit a provisional progress report to their superintendent each year. Based on that yearly report, I think it'd be nice if the board were to get briefed on the status of the provisional licenses we have within our schools. Especially because of the board as my direct representative is kind of who I think I'd be picking on what we're doing to fix these provisionals and get certified teachers in our schools. And I kind of include any positions, like we talked about earlier, that also fall maybe under the supervisor union, not this board, but are in our schools working with our kids. I think the brief would be able to include a number of provisional licenses we have within each school. Are those people within year 1, 2, or 3 of their license? Are they on track to actually get their license by the meet of their deadline? And with that, I think if we did that prior to contracts, when you extend them to teachers, we could use that as an ability to know if we need to offer positions or open contracts up because our provisionals are not tracking and are not going to meet the requirement. Maybe we can get a qualified teacher that is somewhere else who wants to come to this district and then apply for that job. So in the other reference, the rules governing licensing education and prepared for education professional section, it's 5350, and then I highlighted parts out of the 5351 where it states that they get issued a 2-year provisional license. The local district and approved independent school is unable to find an appropriately licensed or endorsed applicant after making all reasonable efforts to do so, or when a license or endorsement is not possible. So that's kind of where I went back. If we do it before the contracts, depending on what time of the year, everybody's already taken who's got their licenses. They're in another school somewhere else. They can't break a contract and come fill these spots that we're issuing provisionals. So if the board's monitoring it and we know that someone is not meeting the basic standard of just doing what they told you guys they were going to do, we could then advertise that position when contracts are open everywhere in the state and possibly get qualified teachers at that time when they see a spot up here to apply and slide in and be in that position. It also talks about mentoring and supervising. We could use that as part of the brief to the school board too, is what's the status of their mentors and how well they've been supervised. But like I said, I think a brief to the board would be able to provide necessary oversight to the provisional licensure program, showing parents and staff that we're serious about getting teachers to complete their provisional license requirements. We're prepared to move on and work to get those that are willing to put in the work to get their licensures done. Thanks. That's all I have.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much. And I did want to just speak briefly to that at the SU level and at our SU board meetings, Jamie McAllister, who oversees the kind of heavy load of all the bureaucracy around provisionals and licenses. So she does give a regular kind of report to that board so that we're kind of staying in the loop of how many people are actively working and where they are in the process. So it doesn't often get down to that kind of granular detail here at the district level board, but we're certainly at the SU board, kind of keeping abreast of the provisional licenses across the entire system, both districts. And Lynn, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that piece.
I mean, we do. We're tracking those things very carefully, and letting someone go before they've had the full amount of time. I understand the point, and at the same time, sometimes it takes people all the way through to the end of the year to be able to complete the requirements because it's a very short time period, especially if some people are hired mid-year, they only get, even if they're hired in January, they only get like the year and a half and maybe 1 extra year if we apply for a waiver. There's a lot to that. So I appreciate why you would ask for something like this, and I agree with Mary, at the SU level is where we tend to give more of those details.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with I think if we're tracking it and they're tracking and we know that, you know, today we briefed that, hey, this person doesn't have it, but everything is in line to be done by June, then yeah, there's no reason to. But I think it's the ones that if we start to see they haven't done anything in 8 months, what makes us think in the next 14 they're going to? Let's advertise their position and see if we can get someone qualified, and if we don't, then maybe we do hang on, and, you know, if they want to stay, they can stay, but at least they now know too, there's a shot across the bow, get it in gear, get something done, or we're willing to look for something else.
Is it possible for you to bring that information from the district board to us on the people who are in the NMV board? In our four schools, that, you know, how they're doing? I mean, if it comes to the district board.
Well, it comes to the SU board,
To the
yeah,
SU
that
board.
Jamie in her board report will generally kind of report on how many people are working on it with a provisional license and where everyone is in their kind of steps toward it. I mean, and those meetings and those board notes are always available to everyone. I mean, it's not something we could start discussing, but it does just tend to be more in the kind of realm at the SU level. But if people have a particular interest in it, maybe, you know, quarterly or annually, we could kind of give an update on it. But it always seems to me, from what I hear from Jamie, it's kind of always kind of in process and in the works. It shape shifts a lot because people are making forward progress with getting their.
Yeah, it's just good to know. I didn't realize that that's where it was tracked.
Yeah. But again, if anyone has any particular questions about it, you can always reach out to Jamie McAllister, or again, her board notes regularly for each of the SU meetings will kind of give a breakdown of the numbers related to provisional licenses. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so moving on, that brings us to our spotlight for Bakersfield. Kevin?
Yes, I'm gonna try to have this under an hour this time. This won't be very long, I promise. I apologize for the last time. So this is Bakersfield. What I want to do is give an idea of kind of where we were, where we are. You know, just simple as that. Here, fine, Mark, we'll see. Let's see what we can do. All right, so, and I shared this, I believe, at the beginning of the year, but this is something that we worked on as a staff, and these are our core beliefs as a staff of what we're trying to work towards over the next handful of years. So just real quickly, we believe in a school where all community members model empathy and kindness. All students can achieve growth through perseverance. Equitable practices to support the belonging of all community members, and we believe in a safe and consistent school creates a joyful, which was the buzzword I think this year at our in-service as well, and a peaceful environment. So this is when we have our staff meetings or we have something going on, this is what we'll start with. We kind of chant it. It sounds odd, but that's what we might do. Or I might chant it. The mission that we've had all year and will continue to have is that we need to ensure that all students are at a grade level or higher. And we talked about that in the beginning of the year at length. Okay. One of the things that as I was sitting there this evening trying to figure out, exactly what I want to say to make sure I didn't forget, so I put it up here, is our students have shown incredible resilience and enthusiasm, especially as we continue to emphasize both academic growth and emotional well-being. We've seen improvements in our tests. We've seen student engagement improvements. You can actually feel it and hear it in the building. It feels different. And I gotta tell you, doesn't fall on my shoulders, doesn't fall on any individual shoulders, it falls on all of our shoulders. And I wanted to make sure, and this is what I wanted to highlight, the support of the central office staff. And in particular, I wanted to highlight our mentors, Amber, Lindsay, or Leslie, and Marty are the three that I have. You know, we Dan, to your point, we are often scrambling for people, and we find people on provisionals, and we're kind of learning how to fly the airplane as it's flying. And so to have these professionals that can mentor and guide teachers, you know, we are just singletons, and so even having another set of eyes, another set of supports is so helpful. And then I also want to say with those singletons, or those people that are coming in from the outside, the staff and the teachers are amazing. They just want to wrap these people up and give them the best that they got. And I've surrounded myself with some fantastic staff this year. In particular, I'm excited about the progress we've made in our academic growth. I'm going to look at that in a little bit. It aligns directly with our goals of enhancing student success. It aligns directly with those belief statements from the beginning. So this is the stuff that I showed you at the beginning of the year, right? These are all kids, little bobcats. In the beginning of the year, this is literacy of last spring. So before I walked through the doors, this is what we had. This is what I was walking into. We had some amazing in-service conversations that were honest and at times a little brutal, to be truly with you. But the staff jumped at it and they're like, yep, we've got to do this. We got this. Collectively, we can make differences. So if you notice, there were 12 in literacy that were distinguished. So if you go the 4, 3, 2, 1s, which a lot of you understand, so 12 and 23. So there's a handful of kids that were up here. Many of the kids were down here, right, and below proficient. We talked about it in the fall time that there's not a parent that wants their kid below this line. So we need to do whatever it takes to make sure those kids get up there. Over the course of the year, you know, we have seen some growth. We've added a couple here, and we've added a few here. In those boxes are what we've added. Now, and we shrunk these down a little bit. What I want to say about this one in particular is there's one grade that didn't do as well as I wanted, particularly one grade. And we have changed teachers. And the difference within there has been amazing. I walk into that room and every second is planned and organized. And so we, you know, through some coaching, through some hard work and some hard conversations, this class, there's going to be a big difference. And when I say a difference, when I have all of my students, K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I look at literacy, there are in K 1, 2, 3, or K 1, I don't want to get off the grade, but there is one grade that has tripled the number of students that are below the line. Okay? No growth. I can't wait to see what the spring brings, because we are already seeing a change of attitude, a change of engagement, a change of behaviors that are leading towards wanting to learn. And it's been a beautiful thing to watch. And so, yeah, this is a little bit different, okay? And it's not I'm rarely ever satisfied, but I'm not satisfied here, okay? In mathematics this past year, this is spring, notice we had 6 up here. Whoop, I hope Courtney didn't do anything, sorry. We have 6, you know, quick math, I can figure this out, but we got a lot of kids below, right? 28 kids above, I can do that math easier. It's up here, okay? I mean, come on, right? I mean, I was in my room just doing this earlier. Like, oh, looky, right? So, I mean, come on. The growth has been amazing, right? And so, now, if you were to go back and we just look, and we did, sorry. And we look, you know, what's this, 71, right?
Yes.
71, right, 71. And now we're looking at,
Wow.
51, 41? 41. Like, you gotta be kidding me. You know, and so I can tell you when I was there 18 years ago, these numbers didn't look like this. These are better than when I was there 18 years ago. And why is it better, right? So Why is it better? How do we get here, and how are we gonna continue to grow? There's a handful of things that are always in the works, right? So this curriculum that we have is scaffolded. So when I walk through, and the other principals can do the same thing, I guarantee, we even talked about this, and I guarantee this is happening. I walk into kindergarten and the kids are doing opinion writing. I walk into first grade, the kids are doing opinion writing. I walk into second grade, the kids are doing opinion writing. I go to my K2 meeting today, because I had my PLC meeting with my K1-2 teachers, and we talked about opinion writing. And so the program that we have, my view, and Amplify for the other grades, has done a fantastic job of aligning, and our teachers have done a great job of aligning so that we can have these awesome conversations in our professional learning communities. So it's so beneficial because I have, like I said, we have the best job ever. We get to watch it in all the rooms, right? And so when that happens, and we're gonna see growth this year, we're gonna see more growth in 3 years, because it's just gonna continue on. It's just gonna continue. I put this down, K2, 3, 5, 6A, because this is what we're doing next year. This year, because of, I inherited middle school being 5-8, and I'm not a big fan of middle schoolers, 5th graders and 8th graders being together. It just doesn't make sense to me. So this is actually 25, 26 school year. We're gonna go back to this, which is what it was a long time ago. But it just makes sense. So those conversations, particularly in our math and our language arts, when we're looking at our programs run K5 and our programs run 6-8. So to have these great conversations in PLC, this makes the most sense to have it like this. And I'll tell you, it's been a beauty to watch. Because of these great conversations, you're noticing scores go up. We're intentional about and I won't put an acronym in there for you, Aubrey, an MTSS, but our multi-tier system of support, we're intentional about it. We're doing and I like to call it the right next step. So we're getting together as an MTSS team, or we're getting together even as a PLC team, or we're getting together even as just a small group of people called the professional learning community, because they're coming together and talking about learning. And we're figuring out what the right next step is, not just what the next step is, because anybody can do the next step, but it may not be the right next step. So when you have these great conversations, it leads to having the right next step. A teacher, and I had this conversation with somebody today, and I'm just picking a grade, I'll go right down the middle there, 4th. My 4th grade teacher is the best 4th grade teacher I have. He's also the weakest 4th grade teacher I have, because he's the only 4th grade teacher I have. So when he meets with a 3-5, or he meets with other people, he doesn't just do the next step, he does the right next step. And so that's the beauty of these. And the last thing that I feel, particularly in our math, and I mentioned it earlier, oh God, is, and I mentioned this before, my interventionist for middle school, Lorelei Westbrook, who was here and was going to be here until we had it here, as a family, is co-teaching and co-planning 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We have seen, and those growth in the mathematics in particular is a lot of our middle school students. A lot of our middle school students went up. Why? Because A, we got a good program. It's a good program. And 2, and I got a fantastic math teacher in that grade, but I have a fantastic interventionist who's co-planning. Because as I said earlier, Katie Bain, who's my math teacher, is the best math teacher and also the weakest math teacher I have in middle school. But when she comes together with Lorelei, they become the best math teachers that I have. And so that's the beauty of those PLCs, and that's the beauty of the co-planning. And I made sure to put co-teaching rather, and also put co-planning, because it can't be on its own. It's a lot of work, but they put a lot of work in. There's been, I just want to, that's really it, but I just want to stress that the reason is we've made such growth isn't because of a person or because of anything other than a collective organization leading towards the same thing. And it's been a great, there's been some hard conversations, like I said, but there's been a lot of cheering because we're seeing a lot of growth, and it's been a lot of fun. So any questions for me? It's under an hour.
That's good.
Yes, sir.
I just, with all the negativity that's out there in the press and out there in the media about how we're failing as schools and districts, how do we get this information out to the public to say, we are not, we are ahead of where we were. Our kids are doing better.
Yeah, so I mean, we had our
State of
state of the school,
Yeah.
right? And I presented the state of the school, this stuff right here. You know, and highlighted it. There were a lot of we had a good group. Well, I suckered him in with a concert, so it worked out really well. Oh, we had a lot of head nods, and I had a lot of compliments afterwards about the work that's happening within our school. And you know, and I made sure to share those compliments outward to the staff because it really, they're working
Which
their
was
tail off.
good because I was there. The audience was educational supporters. You know, it's those other people who don't show up that we need to let them know that we hear negative. And I don't know how, you know, maybe when you do your math night and your
We have
quiz
Cliff
night.
Night coming up on the 27th.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'd love to see you, free games, free books. We'd love to see that. Yeah, I agree, Arlene. The more we get out in front of,
Yeah.
because, you know, when I've been in the community long enough and I go to, sadly, to funerals or I'll go to wherever. And I just heard a lot of negative vibes about the school. And it just breaks your heart, you know, and we have, right now, we have a devoted staff that wants the best for kids. We have a devoted community that wants the best for kids. And so how do we work together to get that? And I feel like we're on the right path. But whenever we can get the word out that what we're doing is working, and we can do better, like I said, I'm very rarely satisfied, so we're doing well.
I think it's such a good point though, because we did have a room full of people who were there because they support education, that's why they go to the meeting. It is much harder for us to reach those people who already know they're not going to support. And so we can't give them real information because they're not attending or they won't read what we put out. So ideas around how to connect with people are always welcome. I think the idea about doing it at math night where you might have more people visible and maybe using other tools like, you know, people are telling lots of stories and there's some truth in some stories and there's some not truth in some stories. And I think that telling our tale in this way, like Kevin and his team have done a really phenomenal job of centering their work on teaching and learning and then celebrating that growth. And I think that, you know, any way that we can get that out to tell the real story about what's
Well,
happening.
I think one of the things too is getting people in the building. I know
Yeah.
we had a community member way back when who was not a school supporter and then joined the staff and came in and as a parent and went away with a very different look.
Yeah.
You know, when you haven't been in a school for 30 years
Mhm.
and then you see what's really happening.
Yeah, I agree. I also just quickly, and not because you're here, Dan, I actually want to talk about it, was we had volleyball and we're playing against Sheldon, which will beat them. And if we don't, I will be very disappointed and probably have to take a day off. But we will have to. But anyways, thanks to Dan and we had a young lady come to me and said, I really want volleyball here at the school. And so we pushed forward. And I think we have a dozen girls or so that are doing it. We have 3 or 4 games plus a tournament, or not a tournament, it's a jamboree down in Essex that we're going to be a part of. And so you just think about the social growth as well as the academic growth is huge. And to hear those student voices and I keep telling this young lady it's because of you that we're doing this. And so just because, but again, Arlene is right, you know, how do we get that out as well? That we have kids using their voice to do something and something productive. Our community or our world often hears the negativity around our students, and particularly our middle school students, and their lack of empathy or their lack of desire or their wanting to play video games. It's not always the case. They really are terrific kids, and building, and we build it and they will come. So, you know, we invested into it. And because of that, we got a good group of kids that are doing it. So it's great. So thank you, Dan, for organizing those games. All right, anything else? Any other questions from anyone? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
So much, really excellent.
You will. You will. We'll play 3 times.
All right, Morgan, that brings us to you with budget.
Much of my stuff tonight is informational. Nothing to report on the current year budget. For FY26 budget, congratulations on returning to normalcy and getting the budget passed. It passed by a 60 to 40% margin, so it was not, certainly not close. So kudos to everyone who was out talking that up in the community. And I do think the push that we had tying it with the school events definitely helped. We had good turnout in a lot of the schools where we presented. Next month, I plan to bring bids for the boiler replacement in Berkshire. I'll probably bring Vern as well for that. As I mentioned in the report, he's secured $200,000 in grant funding so far for that, and we do expect that we'll be able to get a little bit more, probably not one of that amount. We'll also have the boiler bids for Sheldon by our next meeting as well, and we'll bring those to discuss. I mentioned that we got approval to do more sampling in Berkshire to try to move that remediation work along for the PCBs and the 2 rooms that we have closed. Vern and I got a message today that the results are in on that second round of testing, and we've got a meeting tomorrow to discuss them. So hopefully we'll have some better news and a plan forward for you at the April meeting. One thing that I have under other, in January I sent out the FY24 audit. I was not here in February. I sort of had in my mind that you did a motion at that meeting. When I looked at the minutes, it looks like we didn't do that. And so if you are so inclined, I would like a motion to accept the FY24 Northern Mountain Valley UUSD audit.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Emily. We'll do that by roll. Michelle,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Audrey,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Mary is an aye.
And I will be tag teaming with Lynn on the legislative update, but other than that, I don't have anything underlined.
Okay, great, thanks, Morgan. Okay, Lynn.
Okay, so we'll shift to personnel. I don't have a lot on my agenda for this month, so I don't have a slideshow for you to look at. So I will go through under personnel for hiring. Nothing for action, it's all support staff. Scarlett Corfield is the part-time evening custodian at Bakersfield. Resignations this month, he's in Stone, evening custodian at Bakersfield effective February 4th. Reggie Randall, paraeducator at Sheldon, effective March 14th. Shirley Laframboise, she's an SUBT paraeducator, also from Sheldon, effective March 14th. Open positions at Bakersfield, pre-K paraeducator position. At Berkshire, we still have that half-time health teacher that we haven't had any luck hiring, paraeducator position and a grade 1 teacher position for 25-26. And in Sheldon, a middle school math intervention position.
How long has that one been? That's been a minute that that's been open.
Yeah.
Almost a whole year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any,
It is very challenging to find interventionists. So actually should have you advertise for math teacher.
That's what it is.
Okay,
It's
good.
in the description. It says intervention, but it doesn't, it says supporting intervention classes, et cetera, but it's listed as a math teacher.
Okay.
So I got smart.
And then these are not action items, because they are
They're not
bolded
action.
on here.
Oh, they are?
Yeah, it's an action molded.
So just want to double
Yeah,
check.
all of those are support staff.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great.
And under student, I have in-district transfer there and it's the wrong month. I'll bring that back to you in May. Correct? May 1 is the deadline?
May 1's our deadline.
Yeah, so at your May meeting, I'll bring that back. And then, excuse me, next up is the in-district, the legislative update, and Morgan's going to kick us off, and as he said, we'll kind of tag team. There is so much happening with the legislative session a lot of things happening at the federal level. As you all know, a lot of things happening at the state level. He's following it very, very closely. So he's got the most up-to-date information, and I'll jump in.
So at the federal level, there was a news article this week about USDA cutting a couple $1 billion out of aid to schools. Vermont gets some of that grant money. We don't currently we have not anticipated getting any of it for this year. So in terms of immediate impact, we're not worried about that one. We do anticipate there are going to be more cuts in food service through USDA. There's a continuing resolution, which is a sort of stopgap bill to fund the federal government for the year that we're already operating in. That has gone over to the Senate. It has some grant money through the CFP, the Consolidated Federal Programs, which we do get. The money that they're talking about in that continuing resolution is money that we plan to get for next fiscal year. I have not seen what the real impact is. I know that they've trimmed it, but I don't know by how much. There's some testimony tomorrow in Montpelier that we're going to be paying attention to, and hopefully by April we'll have an idea of what that means, especially in terms of staffing at the SU level, but those are staff that are in each of our schools. Anything you want to add on?
Do you want to talk about the strategy that we've put into place, or do you want me to say that?
Sure. I mean, we've had discussions, certainly with principals and with boards over the last, for a long time. It's had more urgency this year about moving some of those staff that we don't want to lose out of the federal programs into the local budgets. On the Enosburg-Richford side, we moved several people. We've not moved anybody in this budget cycle here, but we have in the past. And we've also seen some staff leaving at the, we're federally funded, and we're not planning on backfilling those, which will be some of the funding pressures we get as we anticipate getting less money next year.
The other thing that we have thought about is if we have teaching openings in our buildings and the reduction goes deeper than where we have a buffer now of positions that have moved out and positions that we're not planning to fill, some of those teachers could also shift into local budgets into teaching positions. So, I mean, I think we're hopeful that we have, our plan will get us through this year.
So at the state level, most of the oxygen in Montpelier has been burned up by Governor Scott's education transformation proposal. Two things that are not directly tied to that we're watching. One is a bill got a little bit of testimony on moving the Agency of Education back to a department under the State Board of Ed, so taking it out of the direct control of the governor. It had been there up until about 8 years ago, 10, maybe 12 years ago. Governor Shumlin moved it under him, or the legislature moved it under him. The real advantage of having it under the slightly more independent state board is that when you have a change in governor, you don't have these radical changes in education policy that the field is then kind of bouncing back and forth between. One other bill that we had heard was dead, but seems to be has some new life breathed into it is a cell phone ban bill. I've not watched any testimony, so I don't know where the meat of that bill is lying right now, but it seems to be moving through the House.
I was in a meeting today where they said they haven't really taken much testimony on that bill. So I also I've been so focused on the governor's proposal, I haven't really followed that very closely.
And so for the governor's proposal, I'm sure you've all seen the news articles on it. House Education Committee and House Ways and Means are taking a lot of testimony in different parts of it, and it's such a big bill, they're going to start parting that out to other committees as well, so it's kind of hard to keep track of all the moving parts. There are kind of four major pieces of it. The first one is moving from 122 districts to 5 and 52 superintendents to 5. There's a lot of discussion around what the right number is. Nobody in the legislature is standing up and saying 5 is the right number, and no one's standing up and saying 122 is the right number. We've heard proposals around 9, around 14, discussions around, maybe something bigger than that. But that's kind of one of the big pieces. The second big piece is the funding mechanism. So moving to what's called a foundation formula. Right now, the way we fund schools in Vermont is you, the board, propose a budget to the voters pass it, and the state has to fund that. The governor has proposed, and the legislature actually proposed this last year, switching to a system that's more similar to most of the states in the nation, where the legislative body says this is how much money you get per kid. There may be an opportunity to raise money above that, but they're really saying, this is what your budget is. If you spend within that, you don't go to the voters for approval. The Democrats were trying to get that through last year, so we kind of are suspecting something will go through. The debate will be around what that number is and how you apply it, which kids get greater weight. And so there'll be a lot of digging into that. There hasn't been much yet. I think the details in the governor's plan came late, and a lot of us are still trying to figure out what's going into that 13,200 number, which is the current one on the table.
One of the things that I would just say about that is that there's some staff modeling that is tied to that foundation formula, and in Vermont, legislation was passed, Act 173, several years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, that has really guided for us in Franklin Northeast much of the work that we've done over the course of the last 5 years. Building a strong, healthy MTSS system is something that Kevin talked about tonight, and how essential that is, so that those students who need extra time and support, whether it's just at an intervention level or right up through more intensive targeted, you have a healthy MTSS system. So our schools have built healthy MTSS systems that are not reflected in any of the staffing modeling in that plan. And we still don't know where special ed funding comes from within that plan, because that's also not considered in that formula. So it's a starting place, but when I look at it and I think about, we want to be able to have, the reality is we are a school system that has less opportunities than many of the school systems in Vermont. And when you look at that plan and you look at the staffing modeling in that plan, we would lose positions with some of those pieces. And I don't think that's necessarily the intention behind improving schools across the state, is not having systems to support them. So we're going to push back on some of those pieces that are missing.
Third thing that we're watching is around school choice. So they're proposing that each of these 5 districts will have to designate at least one school choice school. Could be a public school, it could be a private school with, it seems to be significantly more restrictions that we have now. That's still an opportunity for that. And then those district boards would be required to allow at least 10% of their students, high school students, to enter into a lottery to move to another school. So there's kind of a debate right now about whether this is a huge expansion of school choice or a huge retraction. It takes it away for pre-K to 8. There's a lot of equity issues around that in terms of transportation. And my personal take is that everyone is struggling with how to deal with the 4 historic academies: Linden, St. J, Burton, and Thetford. And those are areas that really have never developed their own public high school infrastructure, so they're fitting a need that's a little bit different than an independent school in Chittenden County or even Franklin County. So I think the people who are not necessarily inclined to expand school choice are struggling with how you work that in, as well as we have 2 interstate districts currently, how you deal with that and how you deal with a few of the border towns where there's really there's no public high school in Vermont that's close enough.
So I have a few things to say about that. I'm sure you're
Go right ahead.
surprised. So vouchers are something, parental vouchers that people can take and utilize in public or private schools is something that the federal level, there's some movement towards that. And in Vermont, we have had this situation with our supervisory union structure where some students in some schools get choice, like the students in NMV. Because we don't operate our own high school on this side of the district, they've been able to choose to attend either of our two high schools, or they can take those dollars and go to another public high school, and some students have taken those dollars and gone to private schools. The reality is that when we allow students to take those dollars out of our public schools and into private schools, we're supporting those private schools, and we're taking dollars away from the rest of the students that are in our public schools. So I feel very strongly, even though I am standing before you representing a choice district, that we have to be very careful in this moment that we make the right decision when it comes to where we're heading with this, that we do not open the door up for more choice for students, because that will destroy the public education system in Vermont. I have had the opportunity to work with colleagues from all over the country, and I have spoken with people who have seen vouchers come in, and they're able to take those dollars and go to other places, and what is left behind is not enough to really sustain a quality education for public school students. And one thing to remember is that the way the system is set up, our private schools are allowed to follow different rules than what our public schools have to follow. So legally, they can create the conditions so that they could say, you could come, here is your fee for enrolling. And that would really take care of anyone who is living in poverty not being able to access that. And they also can create other metrics for, choosing the students that they support. And they do not have the same accountability measures as well. So I think that when we talk about the majority of our students in the state of Vermont are public school students, and we're spending a lot of time worrying about the 3,500 students that we're paying for right now. And ultimately, there are about 6,000 other students in Vermont who are private pay in those private schools. They don't have choice, their parents are paying their tuition. This is a really fine line we're walking, and that, in my mind, is probably the most important thing that we get right, because we owe it to the future generations of Vermonters. If we do public education well, that benefits all of us and it benefits all of our communities. We don't want to do something that weakens our public education system. There's my soapbox for the day.
I'm with you. The last of the four things that are in the bill as it's currently been dropped is a pretty dramatic shift of power from the state board to the agency of it. And there's a lot of concern stated on that as well. So I think that will be one of the first things to get edited out of the current bill, but it's another piece that we're watching. Two things that are not in the bill yet, we had expected one of them to drop today, and there was nothing tangible that I could find, is how we fund special education, because the foundation formula that they proposed has a couple of carve-outs, and one of them, the big one, is special education. So we're going to fund that through a different process. And so we haven't really seen, we've heard the theory, but we haven't seen what the legislation's going to look like on that. And then the other, the final piece that I'll talk about tonight is around career technical education. There is a proposal in the initial plan by the governor to take all of the CTE centers, there's 17 in the state, and put them in what's called a BOCES, which is sort of like a school board or like a district, but it's kind of quasi-private, I guess. You don't follow the same rules as a district. And so that is something that has been mentioned on a theoretical level, but we haven't seen any proposed legislation on that yet. The way the funding would work for that is also a little bit unclear. The model seems to suggest that the high schools where those kids are enrolled will get a certain amount of money to hold back to pay for guidance counselors and graduation and things like that. And a pretty significant amount of money will either come directly out of the ed fund or out of those local budget allocations to go to the tech centers to fund those programs.
So a couple pieces I'll just add on. I know we spoke a little bit in the beginning and we kind of barely touched the class size piece, but one of the things that this plan talks about, the affordability piece, it talks about scale a lot and it talks about quality. I have not seen tangible evidence that quality has been centered much in the conversations other than saying this is going to be better quality. I haven't seen yet how it's going to be better quality. I know that they're talking about creating common graduation expectations and requirements, but I'm not sure yet what they're doing around that. The class size piece, they released in the governor's plan that they're looking at grade kindergarten through third grade having a ratio of 1 teacher per 15 students. We took a hard look in the fall at what our class size data look like. We're really close on our elementary. For the most part, we're in an okay place.
That's a
there.
minimum, right?
What's?
That's a minimum, there wasn't a cap on it, it was a minimum.
Right, it was a minimum. And that's higher than what our FNE issue class size policy is. So we're in an okay place there, not so much in our middle and high schools. That is where we start to, in the grades 4 through 12, it's 1 teacher per 25 students. So I'm not clear on how they're counting, if that's counting classroom teachers. I don't know how they're counting other positions in those ratios. But just understand that a lot of this plan is about getting us to scale so that you are, right now it's really hard to get to scale when you are a school like Montgomery that has 1 teacher for every grade level. You only have so many kids in that grade level. So what ends up happening is that in order to have a large enough class size, this year you have a 1 and 2 that's together. Some years you might have a 1, 2, 3, or you might have a 2, 3. So you end up doing all of these different multi-age configurations to try to address those really small class sizes, and that really isn't best practice for students or for teachers who you have to learn the whole new curriculum as you're adjusting to meet the demands. I know Gavin has that from time to time in Berkshire as well. So I've pushed a little bit on the Secretary of Education to say, like, well, what will happen if there are schools that can't meet the class size, right? So she talked about, as we move through this, there will be accountability measures. So we'll have to be able to demonstrate, I'll use high schools by way of example. They'll have expectations around the quality piece, like what you're able to offer in your high school. And if you're too small, you won't be able to offer all the things that you need to be able to offer. They'll be looking at scale, so looking at your minimum class sizes to see that you're at scale, you're offering enough because you want to have the right level of opportunities for your students, and that you're able to do it in an affordable way. So they will be looking at those metrics. So although the governor's plan does not contemplate specifically school closures, in early talks before the actual bill was released, they talked about what did they call optimum school size as well. So that was around 450 for elementary schools and 600 for high schools. So in the bill, I was a little surprised that we didn't see anything about optimum school sizes. And then the more that we've dug into this and the more that we have watched this, the strategy is that they're not, as a state, taking that on to say these schools will close. But what they're going to end up doing is creating the conditions so that we will not be able to meet the expectations around quality and scale, so that boards and superintendents will be in the position of having to say, we are going to have to, maybe you take these elementary schools and you put them together, and this school is a K through 2 or a K through 3, where you can have multiple teachers at each of those grade levels so that you can get to the class size and the scale that way. So it is, you can't get to scale with the same number of schools that we currently have in the state. And then to Morgan's point about districts, right now, we look at solutions. If, like, in your mind, I'm guessing you're probably thinking about these 4 schools. Those false boundaries that we have right now with ER and NMV wouldn't exist. The boundaries that we have with our system and with Missisquoi or Maple Run, those also wouldn't exist. So thinking down the road about getting to scale, those lines won't matter as much. There'll be decisions that have to get made about what makes sense. Hopefully they're getting made based on what makes sense for kids.
Have they talked about redrawing any district lines? Has that been a conversation?
For
Just in grouping, like they had to get to those numbers, have they like assessed, well, if we move this school here, that would be optimal, like?
They haven't gone at to the school level because right now, you know me, you can kind of be frank, right? Right now, the narrative is that it is supervisory unions and superintendents that are making this too expensive and that the solution will be in fewer central offices. I'll give you a tip for free. That is not where the money is going to be found. What they're going to save by reducing the number of districts is not going to save taxpayers what they think it's going to save. You won't see savings until you get down to the level of looking at scale, and the number of schools and the number of teachers is where that is going to be. But it is politically an easier sell to be able to start with the districts and looking at the central office piece.
Well, yes, this is the same discussion that when we did redistrict it, until they made some changes with buildings and staff, there really wasn't going to be big savings. The redistricting that was done however many years ago.
Under Act 46?
Yeah.
You know where we would have saved money? If we had merged into a district ourselves and if we had no longer had choice. So if we had said we're not going to pay tuition anymore, it breaks my heart. I love my friends in Maple Run, but they are able to spend a lot more per pupil in Maple Run than what we do. And every year we write a check for $1.5 million to send kids to their schools. That $1.5 million could have stayed here to support our schools, but we didn't do that. That's where the cost savings would have been if we had said we're a district and our kids will only go to these 2 schools.
If they go to the 5 districts, which includes South Burlington, Shelburne, are they going to have the ability to say, we don't want this 13,000 to be our number, we want it to be 17,000, and now we float a budget that includes all of those towns?
No.
To make?
Well, potentially.
So the way that it's being talked about is that if a district felt that 13.2 was not enough, they could propose higher spending, and there's a mechanism that I don't really understand yet, but it would be basically raising on property taxes in that district only. So a little bit different than where we are.
Which would be if we were in that 5 district, would include us in that. And we know that South Burlington is
So
not
kind
gonna
of
say
no different
13,000
than
is
what
gonna
we're
be okay.
subjected to now.
Well, it is different
it is worse.
because right now you're voting on your budget. You're impacted by the yield in terms of the decisions that are made there. But what would be different is you would be looking at spending from Richford to Shoreham in that 35,000 student district. So if they voted to spend that additional money above, you would all be taxed on that for all of it. So it would have, because you're so low right now, it would have a pretty big impact.
I guess
on
what
tax
I was
rate.
trying to say is for us, we pass a very respectful, well thought out budget. And essentially if someone in the other part of the state wants to shoot it to the moon, we do end up paying for that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm
we're
saying,
the same
we
thing.
are saying
Yeah.
something, yeah.
So the theory on the scenario you're laying out is that when that new board of 5 people is looking at what they're spending in each school, they're going to go down to the school level and say, okay, we're spending $13,000 per kid in this school and $20,000 per kid in this school. 1, can we justify it? And 2, there are a few guardrails against that now. Federal funding is a big one that you have to show that you're treating all your schools relatively equally if you want to get Title I money. That would be a pretty radical course correction if they wanted to keep that money in a district and included us in South Burlington.
Pretty big difference.
Yeah, well, plus the number of voters in Chittenden County versus us up here.
Well, and how are they gonna reconcile, I mean, or be mindful of the difference in the tax base in South Burlington and Shelburne and Charlotte versus up here for Enosburg, Richford, Montgomery, Bakersfield?
I mean, that would be like now, and then it would be however many cents on the grant list for each dollar of spending or something along those lines, so.
Right, but it
everybody
seems
would
like
have the
it'll be
same
more
rate.
onerous for our community up here than it would necessarily for more affluent communities in Chittenden County.
It would probably depend on how they tweak the income sensitivity, because you're also raising a lot more money from, Penny's gonna raise a lot more money from Chittenden County than it's gonna raise here. So it really depends, I think you would have to look at the income piece of it, which they're also talking about changing, but.
Has there been pushback in Montpelier yet about how realistic it is to have a state with 5 giant districts
I've not
that
heard anyone
span
in the
really
legislature
disparate
say that 5
communities?
is right.
I don't even think that the agency thinks that 5 is right. I think that there was potentially strategy. They got our attention with 5. And, I wondered from the beginning if 5 really wasn't the number, but 5 was the starting place to have the conversation. And then are they going to be satisfied with something that gets us to like county or CTE region, right? Like something closer to that 15 to 20 district would probably for us feel like a relief over the 5. But if they had started with, you're gonna go from 52 or 119 to 15, people would have thought that wasn't a great place. So I think there's a fair amount of strategy. One question that I keep getting over and over again has to do with board membership. So that idea of 5 districts around the state, ours would be the largest in this plan with 35,000 students. You'd have 5 board members governing. So the way we understand it, and jump in Morgan if you want to add anything, is that they would create wards and it would be proportional representation. So they would look at the geography of that district. So Franklin County, population wise, is pretty small. So we're not going to get 1 rep from Franklin County. They're likely going to have to pull in Grand Isle and maybe a small portion of Chittenden County, and then they're going to look at the population density, more population dense parts, and then those will have smaller geographic regions, but they'll have representation based on population. So I don't know the math, but my guess would be that we would have, maybe 1 and then 3-ish in Chittenden County and maybe another 1 in the Addison, or another, maybe a little piece of Chittenden goes
There's
that
a
way.
lot of pushback on that. A lot.
Yeah. But that's how, no matter how they do this, proportional representation is going to be a part of, I don't see how they're gonna get away with any other plan.
Well, it's like then you might as well leave people like us off. If you're gonna have 3 from Chittenden County, and then here we are, and the majority's in Chittenden County, well, we might as well just all live in Chittenden County. That's
That's why the hope is that we won't be in that 5 district in which
seeing
Chittenden County.
population growth here, right? So there's a reason why people are coming here, because we're reasonably funding our schools and.
I mean, we're sharing all of these details with you because we want you to be informed, but we also want to remind you that this is a proposal. And it's unlikely to come out, any piece of this is unlikely to come out exactly as it's written right now. We're definitely getting down to, I think that we both have a sense, we talk about this pretty often, that both sides, the House and the Senate, we know the governor, are all invested in, we have to do something around our education system and really starting it through the lens of the affordability piece. And we also know that across the party line, there is interest in moving some of this forward. So I think that there will be action this year. Do I think all of this will be settled this year? I think it'd be very unwise to rush a decision like this. So I think there'll be some elements that I hope that they'll say we need more time to figure out. Like if they're trying to get to what's the right number of districts, in my mind, that might take us a little bit more than a few months to study to make the right decision that's probably gonna last for decades.
And we won't have any right to appeal any of this. This is all just.
It'll be in the law, so, yeah. I don't see an appeal part of this. This is, your appeal is your voice right now, is, you know, appealing to your legislators who are ultimately going to have to vote on this.
And it's not at the phase of any kind of formal public comment yet,
Right.
because it's really just still rather amorphous.
I mean, they are taking testimony on this. It is not, there are no forums that are, you're invited to provide testimony. It's not just a wide open, people can show up. I don't know if that will be a part of it. I think that I would guess that the Listen and Learn tour that the Secretary of Education did throughout the fall is what the governor would refer to as the public comment on what's driving their work. Would you disagree?
No, and I think there's always opportunity to reach out to your legislators. If you know people on either of the money committees or the education committees, that seems to be where most of the action is. It's always appropriate to reach out to them. It is a little amorphous right now because we have a bill that was really drafted by the governor, which is abnormal for the process. And so the education committee, I think, is now wrestling with that and trying to come up with a bill that will be their own. And then at that point, I think it'll be more effective one will have a better idea of the direction they're going, and then it'll be more effective to say, this is why this piece of the law does not work for our region.
Right. I mean, that's the piece that I hope that we can, especially when you're kind of engaged down in Montpelier, be communicating that they understand kind of the unique challenges of our system up here and what our communities want and need. I mean, I'm comforted somewhat by maybe they started extreme so that when it doesn't land at the 5, we're like, okay, phew. But it's I think that part of me that feels that way worries that they are not, that we might get swallowed up in a giant Chittenden County focused district that really doesn't understand our unique kind of concerns and the considerations that are really important to us up here. So I just want to make sure that we are making sure that our voices are being heard. I understand that the changes are going to come and they're going to be pretty sweeping in a lot of ways. I just hope that we can make sure that through the process that we're staying really true to our community and our schools here and advocating as strongly as we can so that within that inevitable change, we come out in a strong way that supports our schools up here.
So I wanna just respond to that. One, you are in a position as a board that Morgan is very active through the Vermont School Business Officials Organization. I'm very active through the Vermont Superintendents Association. And I think one thing to remember is that we are kind of the poster child for why reform needs to happen in education. And that is when you look at our spending on that visual every year that we put in there with all the green lines, we are at the very bottom. So what we can offer our students is very different than what other communities can offer their students. So there's going to be pain no matter what, no matter where they get. I raise my voice all the time to remember there's a huge discrepancy. People, 13.2 would be devastating for some communities that spend way more than that. 13.2 for us would feel like a windfall, that would be amazing to be able to spend that much per weighted pupil. The 25,000 that they're proposing for CTEs, had a conversation with Nate, it would be amazing to be able to spend that much on our programs. And other CTE centers can't imagine how they could cut to that level. So we're representing in that way. The reality is, I don't see how to navigate for all the things, because in order to get to that, there are going to be pain points there. So I don't know that I could fight for that and say, but don't don't do anything that would affect any of our teachers or any of our schools, because they won't look at it that way. There's going to have to be pain points, and we're going to have to be able to take that, as hard as it's going to be. Some schools are going to get closed at the end of this, and there's no community that is saying, please go advocate for them to close our school, right? Like, there is going to be work that has to be done to get all of us closer to scale in order to be able to write those opportunities for kids. And when we think about my belief as an educational leader in the 30 years I've got invested in this, we have to think about making sure that we're preparing all of our students and that we have the right resources to prepare them for what comes next in their world. And just cutting, our strategy has had to be, we continue to cut and modify because we're worried about budget and keeping things down. So I hear you, and I will continue to advocate. And at the same time, I have to be able to look at the whole big picture, as does Morgan, to be able to say, the reality is we can't have all the things. So I don't know if you want to add to any of that.
Just, I think there's real risk at defending the status quo for the status quo's sake as well. When I think about district size, we all know that 5 is ridiculous. But we also wouldn't argue that we should have a superintendent for every 100 kids because we have one superintendency in Vermont who only has 100 kids. You know, we wouldn't argue that we should be split up into 20 SUs up here. School choice, we know that it's inequitable. Even within our SU, some kids have it, some kids don't. So there really should be some resolution of that somehow. The funding formula is not serving our kids well. We are not funding kids based on need. We're funding kids based on the political bent of communities. And you can see that pretty clearly if you look at how much communities spend and how those communities vote on other issues. The AOE, the power grab, I can't really defend that one.
Yeah, either.
But the other 3, there's need to address some problems in each of those.
And Lynn, like, I definitely hear what you're saying as far as that tension around the ways in which this plan and wherever it lands will benefit us as far as elevating how much money we can spend per weighted pupil by a considerable amount, a really meaningful amount. And the tension around how many schools can we continue to operate, how many will we be allowed to continue to operate if the metrics around, you know, ratios and class sizes we have to meet. So yes, I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge. These are going to be challenging conversations to figure out, you know, what this looks like for us, for our communities, for our schools, for our students. You know, and we are always trying to center student success. So obviously that we're going to hope to advocate for whatever kind of framework best achieves that. When you said some schools will close, you're not necessarily saying, I just wanted to clarify, within the district, you're saying across the state more broadly. Not that we may be part of that, but it's not a given. I just, as far as like what the message is that people might be hearing, and I just don't want to incite like panic the moment that people might think we're saying some schools within NMV. We're really saying more broadly, some schools, especially the micro schools in certain places around the state, are going to be the most likely schools to close.
I'm curious if
So-
they have a plan for those school closures, like what happens to those buildings, those structures when it's all said and done that are owned by the school system, like what's?
So I'm gonna answer this, I'm gonna go to that one next. So I think that when I said some schools will close, I mean within the statewide context. And I won't sit and tell you that I think that you'll end up with the same number of schools that you currently have. That would be unfair for me to say. If this is moving in that direction, we see the writing on the wall in terms of having to get our class sizes there. We are hearing from the agency about the accountability measures, right? And we know what the PICUS report says about the optimum school sizes. So I'm not saying that's gonna happen like this. I'm saying if this goes through and it is close to what the current form is, not necessarily the district size, but the scale part about schools, we are really unlikely to come through with the same number to be able to meet their scale metrics because of the number of students that we're serving in each of those. There are some schools within our system that are closer to scale than the other, but that this is just me looking forward and saying, if this were, to go through the way it's likely to go through, those are things that people are really interested in. The class size, I think, has more favor than most of the things in the bill. And I think that there's a deeper reality in the legislature that there are, those conditions have to be set to be able to get schools to scale. So I don't want to say that's definitively going to happen, but I also don't want to lie to you or the community. I want to tell you what we see. So I will always do that.
Appreciate that.
In terms of what happens to the schools, that's
Another
when,
Brigham Academy,
What's that?
Bakersfield,
Yeah.
another Brigham Academy,
Yeah.
abandoned, dilapidated building or.
I've heard
Yeah.
people talk about, what resources can communities be provided to plan for that. So, we have articles of agreement when we merged. So each of the buildings belonged to the town school districts. And then when we merged, they became the property of the merged school districts. So that in the articles of agreement, if a building were to close, that it reverts back to the town. I think you sell it for $1 to the town. And then a lot of towns have done things like community centers or other things, like generally the towns take it on.
Yeah, and the legislation as proposed has similar language so that if the school district owned a building and they didn't need it anymore, it would go back to the town for $1 with a few restrictions that are too much.
The town then has to pay taxes or pay our insurance for those buildings and whatever, and it becomes another taxpayer burden to that community that now has an empty building.
I do think there's a provision about if a town doesn't want it, and I'm now not remembering where I read that, but I feel like there
Yeah, I
was.
don't think you can force it on the town.
Right,
but I
like the
think
town could, it's almost like the town would have the first right of refusal. And the town, if the town doesn't take it, then I think there's some provision about, where did I read this now? I'm not remembering. I think there was something about the sale of the school building. Does that sound familiar to
It's laid
you?
out in the.
Is it in the bill?
Legislation, yeah. And then there's also language around if a school district invests $1 million in a new roof and they close the school and the town takes it over and sells it, the town's gonna pay the district back for those investments over the last few years.
Yeah.
Is there anything in the bill about location? I mean, if you have a school out in the middle of nowhere, it's small because
Yeah.
it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, they
So,
talk about small by necessity, but I don't think they've done a great job of defining that yet.
Yeah, and there's nothing in the bill, as Lynn had mentioned, it's, so far it seems to be limiting the amount of money that's going in and then letting the boards decide
Yeah.
how they're gonna deal with that.
we have
But he
some
had small by necessity and small by choice in that first, I think, in the
Some
18
of the talking
pager.
points,
It was somewhere in there where they were talking about that, because Canaan is a really good example. There's nothing remotely near Canaan,
Right.
and they're like 200 students K through
Yeah.
12, I think.
I mean, at some point you would think closing a school like that and busing them and moving them is not economically responsible.
They'll
and
have
what's
to
good
figure
for the
out.
kids.
They'll have to figure that part out about
Sure.
but what they're not going to do is use that definition very broadly, like it won't pass muster up here, because we're close enough.
Are they talking about what's good for kids at all, or just what's good for taxpayers? Because I'm a little bit concerned about that, for sure. I mean, I just think if a kid who's in the middle of nowhere now has to be on the bus as a kindergartner, riding an hour and a half each way to get to the next closest school, what have you, because it's the middle of winter, that's not good for kids.
I don't think they're thinking about hour and a half bus rides. I think that if you looked here, if we were trying to get to 450,
Yeah.
you're probably talking about 15 miles extra, because it's about 15 miles to the middle of this supervisory union. So if you were busing, you would take your regular bus route and, let's say, add 15 miles to that. So I don't think we're talking an hour and a half, but I know, I get it. But I do think, I don't know that they're doing a great job talking about the benefits, but I will tell you, as a former principal and as a superintendent, there are some benefits to scale. When I think about what Terry Sue can do, because she has 2 of every classroom, when she could put those teachers together. Kevin was talking about it a little bit when he was talking about the interventionist working with the teacher.
Yeah.
The benefit that you get from being able to share students and share grade levels and talk about your teaching and your data, there is something in that model that can improve opportunities for students.
I think I'm being just protective and not unfair about our whole
It's okay, I get it.
Just saying.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
I get it.
Instinctive.
Well, there's a lot TBD, of course, and we'll just keep kind of staying abreast of the changes and being proactive where we can, and trusting that we totally have the capacity here to see us through whatever big transitions are.
I said that
On
before,
the
we're like
horizon.
46, because we just came, Sheldon just came to you guys, we're like, hi, we're here, but I remember telling Lynn, I don't know if I ever told Morgan, but I'm telling him now, like, I was so thankful to have you guys leading that charge through that major shift. I don't know what that would have looked like for us, so knowing that you guys are on your A game again, I very much appreciate that.
We're trying.
Yeah, we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Totally. Okay. Anything else, Lynn?
No?
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on to our principal reports. Kevin, do you have anything else that
Absolutely
you'd like to highlight?
I'm ready to listen to
You're
others.
good? Okay, Gavin, anything you'd like to highlight?
Yes, just that obviously we're shifting gears into prepping for the VTCAF. And so this past Tuesday, we spent some time during P.E.G, not just training and proctoring the test, but also looking at specific formative assessments we can use to help prepare the students as well. In addition to that, this past stretch of time, really from January to February, has been a lot of fun in terms of finding some student-centered learning opportunities, including a recent field trip that our 3rd and 4th grade students took to the Notch in order to apply math skills to cooking. In addition to that, we did have our Winterlude event, which was a huge success and a very joyous moment for our students as well. And that also provided some real life application to learning skills as well, particularly in learning about different cultures, creating research project for our 6th graders to research different countries throughout the world, and also even just doing things such as Sugar on Snow and some of those fun events as well. Finally, I always make a point to share my photos, and this past Wednesday, actually not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before, I'm discovering that my son hijacked my phone and took a bunch of selfies of himself, and I'm not even sure if he knew he was doing it. We awarded our staff member of the month to Miss Mika Menelastis. Miss Mika joined us this past September as our middle school science teacher. She was actually an integral part of Winterlude because she came to us from the Philippines on a J1 visa, And she took that as that was an opportunity for her to teach a lot of students about her life in the Philippines as well. And so we were very excited to recognize her for the sheer amount of courage it takes, not just to take over a class, not just to take over a class of middle schoolers, but also just with the fact that she came from across the country, or I'm sorry, across the world to do so as well. It's been a tremendous learning curve for her, but she has really risen to the challenge, and we're very excited to have her as part of our community.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Gavin.
Great, thank you so much, Gavin. Sandy?
I would like to say that we started our Cognia VTCAP assessments this week, so we started with 5th and 8th grade science. No hiccups, which was really, really nice to start off without any hiccups.
Is that the first time? No hiccups?
First time, no hiccups, yeah. I mean, there's always something, because, you know, you do this once a year, and the first people that start are like, well, how do I do this again? So we did the same training thing, of course, before, but so things went well. And I was very pleased with our turnout at our budget presentation, our state of the schools. That was, I was very proud of students who got up there and performed, some of whom sang songs by themselves, which was pretty cool. One of the youngest ones that sang, 4th graders, and one girl by herself. And they were brave, and I was very proud of them. And thankful for all the people that came out, because it was that break week, so we were on February break. I was that short straw person, remember, so.
You won't have to do it for 4 more years.
I know, somebody else said that to me too, so. And then lots of fun. We had weather at our school with Channel 5 last Friday. And of course it was the frigid weather. It was like feels like 3 degrees or something, and the first students showed up at 5:30. And it was fun. We ran in and out, and Marty Coda set up the stream on the wall. We watched Channel 5 inside the gym, projected on the wall. And there's enough time to go out there, they do the little broadcast, and the kids run back inside, and there's enough of a delay that they can watch themselves on the wall. So it was fun, and they sent me the links today, and I just put them on Facebook tonight for everybody to be able to watch. It's exciting.
Great. Thanks, Sandy. It's wonderful. Tercy?
I have 2 little happy two really brief happy moments that I wanted to share. One was requested by a pair of teachers, and the other one happened to me today. I noticed one of the kindergarten classes was waiting to get into the gym for their UA, and so I was chatting with them, kind of, hamming it up a little bit with them, having a good time. And one of the kids goes, "Miss Principal, we have 2,000 students in our building. It's so big." I said, "You're right, we have a lot of students, but do you want to know how much it actually is?" He's like, "Well, how much?" I'm like, "About 340. Wow. I'm like, "Can you count that high?" I was just kidding around. He starts counting, and then his entire class is in line, realizes he's counting, so they all start joining in.
Oh boy.
And it was these 13 kids lined up counting, and they counted all the way 340 without making any mistakes. And I was so proud of them. And
How late were they for gym class?
they were. She had to run to the restroom, so that's why I was there waiting, because, if you've
340
seen our gym classes, she doesn't really get a break until lunch when it's being used for lunchroom. So, yeah, so they were really proud. So they kept counting, because at the end of the day, another kid's like, "I'm at 700 now, message them." So that was a really cool event, and the fact that they could count to 340 in the middle of kindergarten year, I was thoroughly impressed. The second thing, the 2 teachers caught me at the end of the day today and said, "I gotta share this quick story with you. It's probably something you want to share with the board." I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So apparently they were discussing local, state, and federal governments and what those all mean and look like in class today, and they ended up coming to the idea that it was just like principal, superintendent, school board. And so they were making that connection with it, and then town meeting got brought up, and they were talking about what does that look like, and the teachers they were teaching together in the room with all the 38 kids or whatever it is, and they showed a quick video of some town meeting somewhere, a brief piece of it. A number of the students are like, "I want to go to a town meeting, and I want to go to school board meetings." So if you get an invite from any of my teachers to show up and do a Q&A with their littles in the classroom about school boards and how your over the superintendent, it was over the principal, don't be surprised, and that's why I was asked to share it, because they were totally into it, they were super excited, and they now want to go to town meeting day.
It's great.
Which is great, we're gonna start them early on how this, our country functions, our local government functions, so, but I just thought it was a really cool thing, and I forgot to put that tomorrow night is math night, your board notes, so if anyone free tomorrow night, come on out to Sheldon and get a really great. I wanted it Friday night, which is why I had forgotten, because I wanted it on Pi Day like we did last year, but that's okay, it'll be the day before.
I bet you were outvoted of having.
I was, my
So I
entire,
didn't
my
do that.
entire staff who does this is like, we are not doing it on Friday night. I was like, fine, but yes. But last year we did it on Pi Day and it was pretty well attended, and we expect another, yeah, you were there. Yeah, we expect it to be pretty well attended again, it's a lot of fun. So, and kids love teaching their parents the games and stuff.
It's like a holiday at our house.
Well, yes. All right, that's all I got for you.
Great, thanks, Sarah Sue, appreciate it. All right, any other discussion from the board?
Anything else?
Ooh,
You're good?
absolutely not.
Okay.
No, I asked.
Oh, you did, I missed that.
Yeah.
Sorry. Was reading the look. I read it wrong.
My look at my hat, my hand.
Okay, so our next meeting will be April 2nd, at Berkshire. I don't believe we have any other things to discuss.
There will be a survey email. You will need a special meeting next week, so look for that from Courtney.
And can we have a virtual auction for that?
We could, it would be really tough for there not to be at least a few of you in person.
Okay, so Courtney will send that out.
Special meeting.
We'll need a special meeting, and the details will be in,
Soon.
it's a student hearing,
Okay.
so we'll need something for next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
Okay, great, so keep an eye on your emails for that.
Not for us.
No, I think that's
I don't wanna
just the board.
I don't wanna,
Okay,
the principal who's
I get it.
involved knows.
okay.
Got it.
Perfect, so if there's nothing else, then I'll make a motion to adjourn. We'll do that by ayes and away from Michelle, if you're good in the Zoom world, okay. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you all so much.
Can I